Welcome to Talk World Radio, a half-hour discussion of politics as if the people mattered. I'm David Swanson. This week on Talk World Radio, we are talking about how the Winter Olympics is melting the world's snow away. Our guest, Stuart Parkinson, is joining us from England. He is Executive Director of Scientists for Global Responsibility, which has a new report out called Olympics Torched. Stuart Parkinson, welcome back to Talk World Radio.
Thanks, great to be here again.
The finding snow-covered slopes to do winter sports on is not as easy as it used to be, is it? And not all of the snow is actually snow, is it?
Yeah. So there's a basic problem with climate change is, of course, melting the snow cover, melting glaciers, and melting ice and snow across the planet, especially at the poles. And that's reducing the amount of snow cover that is available for use for winter sports, among other things. And what we've tried to do in this report is we've pointed out that the carbon emissions from the Winter Olympics themselves, and particularly those induced by the sponsorship deals with companies, high carbon companies like fossil fuel companies, are actually making the situation worse. So melting even more snow than just the basic emissions of the Olympics, of putting on the Olympics and all the travel associated with teams and fans traveling to the Olympics.
It's hard for me to ask this because here I am in Virginia where everything for weeks has been covered with 5 inches of ice. And there's ice skating rinks in every field, and you can't walk on the stuff. At least idiots like myself cannot walk on the stuff, and I have a broken wrist to show. But I don't want to be like this jackass senator who came into the US Congress decades ago now and said, global warming does not exist because I have a snowball, so
Yeah.
the fact is there are going to be more extreme storms than before in certain places, but globally there's less and less snow and ice. Is that right?
Yeah. So one of the things about global warming and about climate change is that the average temperature of the globe gets higher. That means there's more moisture in the air. And that means that you get more extreme weather events, storms, floods, but also droughts as well. And it varies according to the time of year, and it becomes less predictable and more extreme. And so this is one of the issues, for example, for winter sports, is that you need reliable snow and you need a certain quality of snow in order to stage winter sports events like the Olympics. So they're becoming more and more dependent on artificial snow, what they call technical snow. They have to create this snow in order to hold the events. But the number of the number of ski resorts is falling. So, for example, in the last 5 years in Italy, they've lost 265 ski resorts, and this is where the Olympics is being held. So it makes it harder to stage it even now, because of the unreliability of the snow and there being less snow at lower levels. And so you have to go further and further up the mountain to reliably hold these events.
And the announcers don't talk about it, but doing slalom skiing on fake snow is not as good as doing it on real snow. I mean, any amateur skier, I think, knows this, right?
Well, they argue that they can come up with a better quality of snow by artificially creating it if the snow is not provided by nature itself. Yeah, there's a whole debate that you can get into about on the sports issue, but I think the key issue is that the emissions from the event and from the high carbon sponsors are making this worse. And it's particularly bizarre to see an event that is reliant on snow being sponsored by companies like, for example, the Italian oil giant ENI and the Italian Airways, ITA Airways, and the Italian or mainly Italian car company Stellantis, which has brands like Maserati and Lancia and Fiat. These are the major sponsors of the Winter Olympics this year, and these are through their carbon emissions are making the situation worse. Through the sponsorship deals, they're trying to sell more products, so making it even worse, and that's fueling a cycle of destruction that is affecting the sport's own future, as well as affecting the rest of us who have to deal with the impacts of climate change.
In the report, Stuart Parkinson, before you even get to the sponsorship problem, there's the climate destruction of the Olympics itself. One could argue that anything humans do these days where special care isn't taken does this sort of damage. But what does the Olympics do that it needn't?
Well, it's a mega event. Such a large international sporting event. It has a global audience, a global TV audience of about 2 billion people. So people watch it regardless of the impact. But where there's a particular impact is where they build new facilities. And they have been doing that in recent years, but they're doing that less. So new venues for wherever it's ice skating or bobsleighing runs, or transport facilities to move the fans around between the venues. That's been a big problem in the past. It's a lesser one this time around. So the Olympics have taken some steps to reduce it, but the big one is air travel. And when you're flying thousands of people to an event, or hundreds of thousands of people to a major event like this, then you're going to generate a lot of emissions, and particularly when people could watch on TV, and you could favor local fans or fans that travel by train or bus, for example. And if you reduce the ticket pricing for those people, then they could then there would be more people traveling sustainably and fewer people traveling in a more destructive way through air travel.
So make the Olympics more of a local, a home team audience for one country in terms of real world spectators.
Yeah. I mean, the Olympics move around. It's in different place in the world each time, and there is still the global audience, so you're still able to watch it on TV, but there wouldn't be so many people flying in and having that high impact.
And they have the World Cup and an Olympics planned for this country I'm in, the United States.
Yeah.
Also, if you if you burn all that jet fuel to come here, you also subject yourself to masked thugs and who knows what from the horrible government. So maybe one choice is much as I'd love to see you, don't come.
Mm. But smaller events as well. I mean, the World Cup, we did a report as well on the World Cup in North America, and how it's going to have the largest carbon footprint of any World Cup, any football World Cup. And it is mainly because it's spread around so many venues across the USA, Canada, and Mexico, and it's got over 100 matches, rather than previously there were 60 matches, but that was expanded from levels before. So it is a particularly high carbon event, the World Cup this year.
But in terms of the Olympics, your report looks not just at what the Olympics itself does, but at the sponsors that the Olympics chooses to have. And I think you go kind of easy on them. You don't look at all the damage these sponsor corporations are doing,
Mm.
just at their extra business, their extra sales that they're getting from being Olympic sponsors. And still, it's major destruction, right?
Yeah, so the report was focused on the climate impacts of the sponsors, but we also have to remember there are other environmental impacts, other social impacts of some of the sponsors. So one concern that we didn't go into in the report, but I think is worth raising as well, is the fact that this year we have arms companies sponsoring the Winter Olympics. So we have two Italian arms companies, Leonardo, which makes the wings of the F-35 fighter jet that's been used, for example, in Gaza for bombing Gaza by the Israelis. Um, One of the other sponsors is Fincantieri, which is a major major Italian shipbuilder. They build warships and they build cruise ships, both high carbon, and of course warships have their all the issues around being involved in arms races and etc. And it's again, it's kind of ironic that the Olympics, which has a tradition of having an Olympic truce, where it says the companies that the countries that are sending teams to the Olympics should not fight wars during the Olympic period. This is called the Olympic truce, and yet is being sponsored by two major arms companies. It just doesn't sit well. Again, it's undermining what the Olympics is supposed to be about.
Well, it's not new that the demand for an Olympic truce is blatantly ignored by these countries. It's nice
Mm.
that every time that people make speeches and popes and peace activists say, let's have an Olympic truce, and nobody does it. But is it new to have weapons companies as Olympic sponsors? Is that a new
Yes.
development?
Yeah. This is a new development this year in this edition of the games. And I think it's tied in with the wider geopolitical situation and the rearmament that's going on within Europe. But that doesn't mean that the Olympics should go along with this.
It seems
There's
the propaganda around the war in Ukraine has been extremely persuasive, and the demand for more military spending, not based on any bogus claims, but as simply a public good to be maximized as a percentage of an economy. It seems like all of this is having an impact, and people are treating weapons companies as some sort of public service rather than as merchants of death profiting from the suffering of others, right?
Yeah, precisely. So it is, yes, it's a way. I mean, there's a wider issue that arms companies are arguing for exemptions from environmental regulations, or that they should even be classified as part of an ethical investment policy because they are helping to defend a nation. But we all know it's much more complicated than that, and much more insidious than that. And arms companies sell to um, regimes with terrible human rights records. And they encourage arms races and etc. etc.
There's also in your report, Stuart Parkinson, and we'll have a link to it up at talkworldradio.org. There's an example of the Olympics getting something right in the past that it could try again. I'm talking about the subject of tobacco.
Yeah. So in 1988, the Calgary Winter Olympics was the first Olympics that banned tobacco advertising. And we see that as a very useful precedent and saying, well, they should apply the same similar thinking and exclude, at the very least, fossil fuel companies, oil companies like Eni, um, and some of the other major oil companies that have sponsored the Olympics in the past. And this should be a minimum exclusion. And you could argue it should apply also to airlines because they are very high carbon, or car companies that don't switch to electric cars, for example, and also to arms companies as well.
Of course, the ideal might be for countries to take some money out of their war budgets and fund the Olympics as a public service, arguably more of a public service than manufacturing instruments of mass murder.
Yeah. There are ways in which the funding structure could change. And particularly, I mean, one of the ideas of sport is that it encourages cultural exchange, friendly competition, an alternative to to sort of the military competition of the past. There are all these ideas tied up in the Olympic ideal, which seem to be being discarded. And I think if we return to some of those values, the Olympics and wider society would benefit.
I don't think these facts that you've revealed in this report have made it into corporate media outlets in the United States, and I don't know if they ever will. But something that has made the news is big protests in Italy about the United States bringing ice, not frozen water, but paramilitary armed goons. Should the Olympics have taken a position? Should the Olympics have said maybe don't bring brown shirt like death squads to the Olympics in Italy?
Mm. Yeah, I mean it's a crazy situation where that's even occurring. It's very disturbing, and yeah, I mean it's bizarre, isn't it? It's bizarre as well as sinister, and seems to undermine again commitment to human rights and equality that's part of the Olympic ideal.
The the other thing that's going on that nobody knows about in the United States, maybe they do in Europe, just down the hills from Cortina in a town called Vicenza, there was a huge heroic struggle to prevent the massive expansion of U.S. military bases. And there are groups there, I can't talk about it, but that are about to put out a report on all sorts of nefarious things, in particularly nefarious things, other than mass killing in general, that they have discovered the U.S. military to be engaged in there. So this is a longer standing protest, and bigger protest going on just down the slopes from Cortina in the plain, and uh, that's not mentioned at all. Just the marches against ICE in Milano, I think.
Mm. I mean, there have been some. There has we've had some good media coverage for this report in Italy and in
Good.
Europe. So there has been quite a lot of interest.
That's
So
wonderful.
so that's good to see. And there have been petitions. Sports people have spoken out about the sponsorship. There have been petitions of 20,000 people signing a petition saying we should drop fossil fuel sponsors from the Olympics. There are lots of local protests in Italy around some of the local environmental impacts of the games. Some of the concerns around, just not enacting strict strict environmental and nature protections in some of the venues and in some of the construction activities that have been going on. So there's a few protests around that. I mean, it's another issue. It's sort of bigger issue that, of course, Italy hosts U.S. bases that have U.S. nuclear weapons, and Italy is part of the NATO nuclear sharing program, and that's not talked about very much. But, there are all
Up
these U.S.
now,
nuclear weapons around Europe, and Italy is one of the places, Italian, U.S.
up now from
That is,
5 to 6 countries, we think, in Europe, including the one
yeah,
we're sitting in, right?
yes. I mean, that's the latest situation in the UK is that the government has announced the purchase of F-35A jets that are what they call dual capable aircraft. So they are able to carry nuclear bombs as well. And we believe from various technical documents that US nuclear bombs are now back on UK soil after many years of them not being around. And we think that they are at Lakenheath Air Base in the eastern England.
And there are big protests to the great credit of the people
Yeah,
there, right?
yeah. The protests are growing. There's another one at the end of February, 28th of February, that we're supporting. So there's a lot of unhappiness about this as well. But again, we need bigger protests and more attention to this because governments are proving impervious to challenge at the moment over this issue.
And I should slip in here protests at bases everywhere on a global days of action to close bases, February 21st to 23rd in England and Italy and everywhere. There's a website, daytoclosebases.org. The other thing is it's hard to say which bases have the nuclear weapons because they don't tell us. And the Australian government asked and was told it's none of your business whether we ever have nuclear weapons at any US bases in Australia because there are bases, it's just your country. So how do we even know?
There are documents that there's certain wording that is used in, particularly in US military documents, that indicates that nuclear weapons are probably present. The Federation for American Scientists has done some extensive research in this area, and they publish on their website all the information that they are able to get. And it's one of the one of the bizarre benefits is the US military seems to be a bit more open about this than various countries like the UK in terms of some of the infrastructure related to nuclear weapons. So it's possible to track where these weapons are, at least, or where they're likely to be. There's still so much secrecy that you don't know exactly where, or you don't know exactly when, or you don't know how many. Um, but certainly you have some idea of where they probably are at some time,
And that includes Lake and Heath by that means.
and that includes Lake and Heath. Yes.
Yeah, good. Um, the You mentioned Stuart Parkinson when we were talking about these military companies as sponsors of the Olympics, that they actually want special privileges. And to a great extent, they already have them, right?
Mm.
Various reporting requirements on carbon emissions, for example, are allowed to exclude weapons companies as if they just have some second Earth somewhere that they're polluting that isn't the same one as everybody else. And a lot of peace activists used to put up an effort when they would hold these COP meetings around the world on climate. The one this year coming up will be in Turkey, I think, trying to get military carbon emissions included, just not stopped, just included in the reporting on the
Yeah.
pollution of the planet. Is that a struggle worth continuing? What's happening there?
Um, it's worth pointing this out. I mean, the military emissions are hidden in various ways, so it may be that they turn up in some of the official statistics, but they are only some of them are labeled military. Some of them are come under broader categories like transport or aircraft or or public buildings. Um, some of the emissions that are occurring internationally or over international waters or international seas aren't included in official national reports. So there are all these issues. I mean, actually, the biggest issue now is that the US is not reporting any carbon emissions, not just its military emissions, no, none of its emissions at all, because of what the Trump administration is doing. Unfortunately, there are even bigger problems now with emissions reporting because of this exclusion. Yeah, trying to get better rules on military reporting military carbon emissions is really difficult. We should keep trying, but it is really difficult.
At least in relatively decent countries. In the US, the government is clearly trying to maximize secrecy and destruction. As we speak, I saw a headline on the president ordering the Pentagon to use more coal.
Mm,
That can't be exactly beneficial. Meanwhile, you have the so called green opposition to such disastrous, sadistic policies, demanding that we use more nuclear energy. Completely heedless of any connections to nuclear weaponry or basic
mm.
facts, I think, about nuclear energy itself. So if you if you want to comment on any of this disaster we're in.
Yes, I mean it there are certain voices within the low carbon community that are promoting nuclear power, and I don't think that is across the environmental movement as a whole at all. I think there's still a lot of opposition within the environmental movement who haven't accepted this sort of clean label for nuclear power, and understand the links with nuclear weapons and with military nuclear power technologies, and the key role that the nuclear industry has in creating nuclear reactors, which are used on nuclear submarines, which carry nuclear weapons, and that key link, which is it's part of the drive behind these so-called small modular reactors that the industry claims are going to generate so-called clean power and save money, but of course the economics aren't nearly as good as they claim, without considering all the other damaging effects
of generating power in a battlefield in order to have a battle, for example.
yes,
we
yes.
we got just a couple minutes left. Stuart Parkinson, we did manage to get an airport shut down here in the United States because a militarized border guard shot down a balloon that apparently he was afraid would teach him Spanish or something. He claimed it was a Mexican drone. So maybe this is an approach that we can get all these militaries that are in every inch of the planet to start shooting at balloons and shutting down all the airports. I don't know what you think. But more seriously,
I'm not sure about that one.
it's the only thing that's worked. But what can people do who want to follow your work with Scientists for Global Responsibility and to keep up with what you're doing?
To follow our work, simply go to our website, and you said you'd be putting the link on our on your website, so thank you for that. I mean, it's important to get involved with campaign groups, particularly those who see military emissions as part of the climate issue. Encourage more of the mainstream environmental organizations to take account of military emissions, and that they're an important part of the issue. We estimate that the carbon footprint of the military the global carbon footprint of the military is something like 5.5% of global emissions. So it is a serious part of the problem. And of course, it's growing with military spending growing rapidly again. This figure will be growing. So yeah, trying to mainstream these issues within the wider environmental movement is a critical thing, I think.
Very good advice. We will keep trying to do it. Our guest has been Stuart Parkinson, who is the executive director at Scientists for Global Responsibility. We will have a link to the report, Olympics Torched, at talkworldradio.org. Stuart, thank you for everything you're doing and for coming on Talk World Radio.
Thank you very much.
This is Talk World Radio. I'm David Swanson. Take action at rootsaction.org. Help end war at worldbeyondwar.org. Read or listen to today's Peace Almanac entry at peacealmanac.org. All past shows can be heard at talkworldradio.org. Talk World Radio is produced in Charlottesville, Virginia, and syndicated by Pacifica Network. There is no way to peace. Peace is the way.